What's up, guys? Hope you're having a good day. There's an amazing bet on this UFC Fight Night Dos Anjos versus Luque card that I'm really looking forward to sharing with you guys when we get to breaking down that fight. But first of all, I want to say a big thank you to everyone that was in the live stream research session yesterday, where we researched the Rafael Dos Anjos versus Vicente Luque fight as a group. It was really useful. You guys dropped major knowledge. I think we did a good job of researching the fight, and for those of you not in the live stream, I'm looking forward to sharing our findings with you, summarizing the stuff that we saw in both Dos Anjos's and Luque's recent fights. And yeah, we'll break this fight down in just a moment. Obviously, next week we've got a massive card headlined by the fight between Aljamain Sterling and Sean O'Malley. So if you guys want me to do another fight research stream for that fight, hit the like button below, and as soon as this video gets 200 likes, I will do a live stream for the fight between Aljamain Sterling and obviously Sean O'Malley. Also, if you guys want it, I'll do a live stream for the Amanda Lemos versus Weili Zhang fight as well, but leave a comment in the description for that one for me. So hit the like button below. Hit the like button below. 200 likes will get that Sterling Sean O'Malley live stream going, where we can all research the fight as a group, see if we can dig up any bets. Obviously, we did when we researched the Gaethje versus Poirier fight as a group. We were able to determine that Justin Gaethje was a very good bet. You can see by the thumbnail we bet Gaethje. He came through for us in a big way. We've also got a very good bet in this video to share with you guys, and I'm keen to get your thoughts on that. And hopefully we'll be able to find a bet on, like I say, this Sterling versus Sean O'Malley fight. So yeah, hit the like button. 200 likes, we'll be good to go. Now let's kick things off by breaking down the main event of this weekend's card, which is going to be Vicente Luque against Rafael Dos Anjos. This is a really complex fight with so many different layers to it, so many different things to think about. And so we're going to go real deep on this one from a betting point of view. And I really hope that you find the information I'm about to share useful. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, in fact, let's just refresh this to make sure we've got the latest odds. We can see that Rafael Dos Anjos is the slight favourite at average odds of around 1.81, which is going to be minus 123 for an implied probability of 55%. If we take a look at the odds on Vicente Luque, he's around an average of, say, 2.02, which is going to be plus 102 for an implied probability of 50%. So, you know, the odds roughly in the 50-50 odds range. The bookies don't have a strong opinion on this one. So, if we take a look at the X factors, the X factors are going to be a big talking point in this matchup. So, Rafael Dos Anjos is 38 years old, 5'8", with a 70-inch reach. Vicente Luque, 31 years old, 5'11", with a 76-inch reach. Dos Anjos is also moving back up to welterweight after having a couple fights in the lightweight division. Obviously, well, this was a catchweight, but closer to lightweight than it was welterweight. Obviously, he made quick work of Brian Barberena. Now he's facing a very tough opponent in Vicente Luque. So let's start off by digging through the X factors in terms of age and size. So the first thing I want to focus on is the size difference. We know for a big chunk of Rafael Dos Anjos' career, he competed in the lightweight division. So he is one of the smallest welterweights in the division at 5'8" with a 70-inch reach. For perspective, he should probably be fighting in the featherweight division with a wingspan like this. Lightweight, max. You know, he's very undersized for welterweight. You won't see many welterweights that are just 5'8". And so RDA is giving up a pretty big size disadvantage to basically everyone that he fights. Now, it obviously hasn't caused him too much of an issue because he's been able to rack up, you know, wins here and there. But yeah, size is always going to be a big issue for RDA. Luque at 5'11" will be a decent amount taller than RDA, but he's also got a 6-inch reach advantage. Now, statistically, when you have a 6-inch reach advantage, it gives you around about a 67% chance of winning. So this is one trend in Luque's favour. If we look at Luque's odds, we can see that, you know, his average odds are around 50%. implied probability. If you were to just blind bet on every single fighter with a 6-inch reach advantage over their opponent, you'd win about 67% of the time. So that gives you a pretty decent edge over the bookie. But of course, it's very dangerous to just blind bet on statistics. Some people do it, they might have success with it. I don't personally take that approach, but that is definitely a strong trend that you need to bear in mind if you're thinking about betting on Dos Anjos this weekend, and a very strong trend to fight against. Now, there's also, a big advantage for Luque when it comes to age, because Dos Anjos is going to be 39 years old in October. And we know once you move past the age of 33, your body starts to produce significantly lower levels of testosterone, and you start to decline, a lot year on year. Your athletic performance really dips. And while I wouldn't say RDA has declined as hard in recent years as other guys in their late 30s, obviously Father Time is undefeated, and we know RDA is going to be declining from fight to fight. And with Luque being 7 years younger than Rafael Dos Anjos, this also gives him around a 67% chance of winning. The younger fighter wins around 67% of the time when there's a 7-year age gap in a fight. And so now Luque has got two pretty strong trends on his side, with him being younger, having the reach advantage. Two very strong trends again to fight against if you're betting on RDA this weekend. And so, if you were to just blind bet those statistics over the long term, you'd probably make a profit, which may be reason enough for you to bet on Luque this weekend. But when we talk about age, they say age is just a number, and ultimately the usefulness of statistics is very much tied to whether or not they're interpreted correctly. And it's really dangerous for us to kind of take a blanket approach to interpreting different statistics within mixed martial arts, because in such a complex sport, we need to be very nuanced in how we look at things. And even though there is a pretty big age gap in this fight, and Luque's in his prime at 31 years old, you'd be expecting him to make big improvements from fight to fight. RDA has had over 40 pro fights. He's going to be declining a lot from matchup to matchup. When it comes to age, I always like to use an analogy from Cars. Not the Disney Pixar movie, but like Cars You Drive, right? So if you've got a 10-year-old car that's only got 2,000 miles on the clock, but you've got a 1-year-old car with 200,000 miles on the clock, the 10-year-old car, even though it's a lot older than the brand new car, is probably going to be a lot more reliable than the new car with 200 miles on the clock, because obviously the engine, the components, they haven't had as much wear and tear on them, so they're going to hold up better, they're going to work better for longer. I think the same kind of applies to athletes. And while Rafael Dos Anjos has been in a lot of wars, he's had a lot of injuries, he's suffered a lot of damage, he's had a lot more fights than Luque. For me, it's not like Dos Anjos has declined to the point where his athletic performance has fallen off a cliff, his reflexes are shot, he's chinny, he can't take a shot anymore, his cardio's bad. Like, for me, RDA, even though he's going to be 39 years old later this year, is still a really solid fighter. And so, yes, we need to proceed with caution if ever we think about betting on a guy like RDA. But age is just a number, and there's like another layer of analysis we need to do to really consider where two fighters are at this exact point in their careers when they face one another. Because even though Vicente Luque is only 31 years old, he's obviously coming into this fight on the back of a 1-year layoff after he was suspended for 1 year, a medical suspension for 1 year, after his loss to Jeff Neal, because he suffered a brain hemorrhage after the fight. So this is like really, really serious and scary. So when I talk about Vicente Luque's health issues, what's happened to him, I want to be very respectful because it's really scary, and I can't imagine what he's been through over the last year. It must have been horrendous. Not only to suffer this life-threatening health issue which kills a lot of people. My uncle actually died of a brain hemorrhage, but also having that fear of maybe losing his ability to earn an income, right? Because if he can never fight again due to this health issue, he's going to have all kinds of concerns over money, his livelihood, how does he feed his family. So I want to be very respectful when I talk about this, but it is a significant factor for us to take into consideration when we talk about betting this fight. And ultimately it's my job to try and find strong positions to put my money, to win bets on football, MMA, and when we're doing that, we have to consider every single piece of information that we've got available. So I will start off by saying I am very shocked that this fight is happening this weekend, just because a brain hemorrhage is so serious that not only do I feel it's unlikely the fighter that suffered that injury can ever be the same again, but I think to survive something like this, you've got very lucky, and then to go right back into a situation where it could happen again, next time you might not be so lucky. I'm very surprised Luque was cleared by the Athletic Commission for this fight, and I hope he can get his career back on track. Looks better than ever this weekend, and this doesn't affect him in any way. But I do feel that's the less likely outcome here, because if you look at Luque, even though he's only 31 years old, he has had over 30 pro fights, which is a lot of fights for a 31-year-old. And not only that, but Luque is one of these guys that has built a career off going to war and putting on exciting fights. I mean, we all love Luque. He's incredible to watch. And one of the reasons why we all love him is because he's exciting, right? He comes out the gate super aggressive, takes the fight to his opponent, and he's just very entertaining to watch. But that comes at a cost, and we've seen him in so many wars against Jeff Neal. He was wobbled against Tyron Woodley. The Nico Price fight was a war that took incredible damage in the Stephen Thompson fight. The Mike Perry fight was a war, and you can go on and on and on and on, all these wars that Luque has been in. So I know that Rafael dos Anjos has been in a lot of wars as well, but when we talk about miles on the clock, the damage that Luque's taken, now he's had a brain hemorrhage, you have to question whether this is going to catch up with him earlier in his career than you'd expect it to at 31 years old, and what this is going to have, or what kind of impact this is going to have on his ability to get his career back on track and perform close to his full potential. Because every single week in these breakdown videos, we talk about how bad knockouts can change a fighter forever, and not in a good way. We've all got examples of guys that were knocked out and they were never the same again. They couldn't take a shot like they used to. They just weren't as durable. They lost all their confidence. They were crippled by performance anxiety. I think probably the best example I can think of is Cody Garbrandt, right? He went from being the best bantamweight in the world, absolutely clowning on, Dominic Cruz and dominating, Cruz, literally clowning him with how dominant he was, to all of a sudden, being very fragile, not being able to take a shot, and, almost losing his position in the UFC. And he's got a tough fight coming up against Mario Bautista. So, it's one of those situations where we know bad knockouts can change a fighter forever, and they often do. Imagine what a brain hemorrhage could do. And it might not even have any physical impact on Luque at all. He might have made a full recovery in the last year, but you have to think of the psychological impact, the performance anxiety. One of the things that makes Luque great is his fearlessness. He's got that warrior spirit where he just comes forward, takes control of the centre of the octagon, puts relentless pressure on his opponents and tries to break them. Will he be the same guy? Will he be as capable? Will he be as skilled? Will he be as effective in the UFC if he doesn't have the confidence to fight like that anymore because he doesn't want to take damage and risk this happening again? Now, this actually could turn into be a hugely positive thing as well, because throughout UFC, there are examples of guys that reach a certain point in their career where they started to decline or they've had a bad injury and they realize they can't fight like that anymore. So they adjust their style of fighting. They make a change to fight in a safer, smarter, more sustainable way. Probably one of the best examples I can think of in recent history is Glover Teixeira, where if you look at the majority of Glover's career, he would be a brawler, right? He would love to come forward, similar to Luque, take control of the centre of the octagon, bet on his chin and toughness against yours, put you up against the cage, just look the dirty box, beat you up, and make it a dogfight. But as Glover got older, as he approached his late 30s, he realised that that style wasn't sustainable anymore. He was taking too much damage, getting rocked, wobbled, dropped in every fight. So then we saw Glover evolve into more of a grappler, where Glover would start to use more grappling heavy game plans. Now, it's possible Luque could make that kind of adjustment. A year off gives him a long time to reevaluate how he's been doing things, if there's a better way to do things, if he can improve. So I'm optimistic about what we might see from Luque this weekend. But I'm also very fearful that he may never be the same again, which does make it very difficult to bet him in this fight. It's a big red flag in the most respectful way possible. And now, if we think about how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, right? If we just ignore the fact RDA might be declining bad because of father time and Luque may not be the same guy after his brain hemorrhage, and if we just focus on how these two match up from a stylistic point of view based on past performances, it's still quite a difficult fight to predict, because if the fight stays standing, I do give Luque a decent advantage. Even though he's very bad defensively, one of the reasons why he did take so much damage in the Jeff Neal fight and throughout his career is because he just doesn't move his head much. He will come forward, take control of the centre of the octagon, pressure you, but he won't move his head and he won't take a backward step. Which means when his opponent opens up and throws shots at him, because he doesn't move his head or back up and look to slip anything, they know exactly where the target is. And that's why Jeff Neal had so much success. He landed the clean power left hand from the southpaw stance over and over and over and over again, because he knew where the target was. Luque wasn't elusive, he wasn't covering up, he wasn't moving. He was an absolute sitting duck. Now, fortunately for Luque, that might not cost him as much in this fight, because he's got the 6-inch reach advantage over Rafael dos Anjos, which will make it harder for RDA to get inside and land. And on top of that, RDA isn't a big power puncher. For the most part, he's a volume striker. I mean, even in his prime, during his title run in the lightweight division, he wasn't even a power puncher back then. So moving up to welterweight, he's even less dangerous, because obviously he's very undersized. And if you look at RDA's record, you've got to go back very, very far in his career to find the last time that he won a fight by knockout, all the way back to 2015 when he KO'd Donald Cerrone. So Rafael dos Anjos hasn't knocked anyone out in 8 years. Could he be, could he knock Luque out? Absolutely. We know Luque takes a lot of damage. Rafael dos Anjos is still a very skilled striker. But I think that this fight is a lot more forgiving for Luque than, a fight against a real heavy-handed power puncher like Jeff Neal. And so Luque's bad defense is unlikely to cost him as much in this fight. So the way I see this fight playing out on the feet is same as most of Luque's fights. Luque coming forward aggressively, taking control of the centre of the octagon, chipping away at dos Anjos, taking shots himself but dealing with them quite well, and ultimately landing the harder, more damaging, more impactful shots on dos Anjos. and just winning the stand-up exchanges, essentially. Both guys will have success, but I think the size, the reach, the aggressiveness, the power of Luque on the feet will cause RDA problems. But we know that in recent years, Rafael dos Anjos has been using grappling heavy game plans to get the job done. He obviously took Barberena down and dominated him in his last fight. He tried to use a grappling heavy game plan against Fiziev, was unsuccessful. He did use a grappling heavy game plan against Renato Moicano and Paul Felder and had decent success with it. Even though this fight went to a split decision, it was a pretty bad decision. It was a clear unanimous for RDA. It was a pretty one-sided fight. So RDA is a good offensive wrestler. And Luque, as we know, has pretty bad takedown defense, and he's pretty weak off his back. Now, he does have good submission defense. He also has a dangerous submission game himself. Of course, he submitted Michael Chiesa. But Luque is one of these guys that gives up very cheap takedowns, and he does spend way too long working his way back up to his feet. Now, he's had a year off to improve, so maybe his takedown defense and ground game will look a lot better this weekend. But the way I would look at this is, if Luque hasn't really improved his takedown defense in 30 pro fights, he might be one of these stubborn guys that never improves. But this is another area where the size difference between these two can come into play. Because on one hand, you could say it will make it harder for RDA to take this fight to the ground, because Luque is a lot bigger than him. So Luque is bigger, stronger, more physically imposing. So it'll be harder for the smaller guy in RDA to kind of, muscle Luque to the ground. Obviously, Belal Muhammad had a lot of success with grappling against Luque, but Belal Muhammad is bigger than Rafael dos Anjos. But then on the other hand, this is one of those situations where size could actually work in RDA's favour. Because at 5'8", he's got that small, compact muscular frame, that low centre of gravity. So when he shoots in on Vicente Luque's hips, naturally he's going to be shooting in deeper on the legs and hips of Luque, which gives him a better chance of upsetting Luque's balance. So this is one of those fights where size could make it easier or harder for RDA to grapple, and based on past performances, I don't have a lot of confidence on which way it's going to go. Based on past performances, I think RDA can have a lot of success with his grappling, but I'm concerned that Luque will do what Glover did after the brain hemorrhage, look to evolve, look to improve, look to change his fighting style, and will come in with just a better overall ground game this weekend. Because, we've seen guys like Fiziev make it very difficult for dos Anjos to get takedowns, and Luque is obviously a lot bigger than Fiziev as well. So it's a tricky one. So if we summarise this fight and how I see this one playing out, personally, I think it's very, very, very difficult to bet on Vicente Luque this weekend. For me, a brain hemorrhage is so significant that even if Luque has been cleared to fight and he's 100% healthy and no different from anyone else on this card, there's a huge potential psychological impact on Luque coming into this fight this weekend. GSP said that fighting is 90% mental. And even though Luque is an absolute warrior, he's also human. And you've got to consider the psychological impact that having a serious health issue like that might have on his ability to perform. It might change him forever, and not in a good way. So for me, it is very, very, very difficult to justify a bet on Vicente Luque this weekend. If I absolutely had to bet this fight, if my life depended on it. Sorry guys, we got a bloody heat wave in the UK. It is fucking hot over here. It's getting hot over here, boys. But anyway, hair's going crazy. If you said to me, you absolutely have to bet this fight, your life depends on it, gun to your head, who are you picking in this fight? I would go Rafael dos Anjos. I wouldn't feel very good about it, because there's so many strong trends you're fighting. He's a lot older than Luque, he's a lot smaller than Luque, the reach advantage, all that kind of stuff. But the reason why I would pick dos Anjos is, at least I know what I'm getting from him. He's very consistent, even at this stage in his career. He's still got good cardio. He's still got a good chin. He's still very durable. He still has good fight IQ. He still has very good grappling. So at least I know what I'm dealing with Rafael dos Anjos. With Vicente Luque, it's possible that he could look an absolute shadow of himself this weekend, not be able to take a shot anymore, be really chinny, be really gun shy. Maybe his performance will be totally, maybe he'll be crippled by performance anxiety, or, sometimes better the devil you know. And even though there's a lot of issues with dos Anjos, at least I know what I'm getting, and that's why I would lean towards him. I'm not going to be betting this fight. I think it's a very, very dangerous fight to bet. I don't see a strong position on either side, and I think the odds are absolutely where they should be, with both guys being in the even money odds range, because you can make strong cases for either guy winning this. It's a really complex fight, and I'd love to know your thoughts on it, so please leave a comment below and let me know if I've missed anything. Let me know what you think. Let me know who you are leaning towards this weekend. Let me know if you're betting this fight. So what we'll do now is take a look at the over-under and also the prop bets. So obviously both these guys are tough as nails. Very, very durable. For me, again, without knowing what version of Vicente Luque we're going to get, it's very difficult to lean either way on the over-under. Because if both these guys show up and perform like they usually do, I think it's pretty likely that fight will go to a decision. Both of them, very durable usually. Both have got good cardio. Both are pretty tough. RDA can use his grappling to run the clock down a bit. But obviously, RDA probably on a steep decline. Going to be 39 years old in a couple months. Luque coming back after a serious health issue. For me, I just don't have a strong feeling on it. I lean more towards fight goes to a decision, but with everything we've discussed in this video, there's no way I would bet it. Now, in terms of the prop bets on this one, if I would go into... So I'm not going to bet these props myself, but if you're the kind of person that likes to sprinkle a little bit of money on every fight to make watching it more interesting, a couple props you might want to consider is Rafael dos Anjos to win by knockout or TKO, on the basis that Luque may not be able to take a shot anymore. Again, I know RDA is not the most dangerous striker, but it's possible that Luque's chin and durability could be totally gone. Another prop I would consider is Luque by decision, because if RDA does have trouble getting the fight to the ground, and the majority of the fight stays standing, we know dos Anjos is difficult to get out of there because he's tough, he's durable, he's got a good chin. And so I could see Luque winning a decision in a stand-up fight. It'll be a war. On top of that, also, it's worth noting that, Luque may also be gun-shy, fight more cautiously and safer than usual, which would increase the probability of this fight going to a decision. So I hope you found that useful. Very warm in the UK. We are having like a heat wave, so I'm just going to take a quick drink before we get into the next one. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Swanson versus Hakeem Dawodu. So we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one. We can see that Hakeem Dawodu is the favourite at average odds of around 1.44, which is going to be minus 227 for an implied probability of 69%. If we take a look at the odds on Swanson, he's around an average of 2.85, which is going to be plus 185 for an implied probability of 35%. So Swanson is 39 years old, and he's going to be 40 years old in November, just 3 months from now. He's 5'8" with a 70-inch reach. Hakeem Dawodu, 32 years old, 5'8" with a 72-inch reach. So both guys roughly about the same size, but there's obviously a massive difference in age. Well, not actually a massive difference in age in terms of number, but a very notable difference in age in terms of the stage in Cub's career that he's at, approaching his 40s. Because as we know, the lighter weight classes decline earlier in their careers. So, 39 years old for a lightweight, light heavyweight, a heavyweight is still pretty old. But for a featherweight, that is absolutely ancient, because we know the speed, that the lighter weight classes are all about speed, reflexes, and athleticism, and they tend to be, some of the first things to go as you get older. So, in the last fight, where we were breaking down RDA versus Luque, we were talking about how statistics are only useful when they're interpreted correctly. And with a fight like this, where you've got a 7-year age gap, we know that the younger fighter wins around 67% of the time when there's a 7-year age gap in a fight. However, that's an average. So that statistic covers fights where a 33-year-old is fighting a 26-year-old, for example, or a 23-year-old's fighting a 30-year-old. And in situations like that, the younger fighter, particularly like the example of a 33-year-old facing a 26-year-old, they probably don't have much of a statistical advantage, because the 33-year-old is going to be in their prime, and the 26-year-old is going to be a little bit greener. They're going to be younger, more inexperienced, more prone to making mistakes. Whereas if you've got a 40-year-old fighting a 33-year-old, obviously you'd expect the 33-year-old to win a higher percentage of the time than 67%. And so this is one of those situations where 67% isn't a massive figure, in massive probability in favour of Dawodu winning this. But I feel if you just track the statistics for how often a 32-year-old beats a 39-year-old when they fight, it would be far higher than 39%. Because remember, that 67% stat is an average. So that does give Dawodu a pretty big advantage in this fight. And for me, that is way too strong of a trend to try and fight against. Irrespective of how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, with Swanson's age, with Father Time being undefeated, we know Swanson's declining from fight to fight. He's had, over 40 pro fights. Swanson's just not someone I would consider betting this weekend. But if we consider how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, let's quickly cover the grappling aspect of this fight, because that's probably the easiest area to cover. Swanson will have a huge advantage on the ground. And if I felt confident that Swanson would come into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan, I would absolutely bet Swanson, because Swanson's a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, a good offensive wrestler, and a good MMA grappler. Unfortunately, Swanson is also one of these stubborn strikers that even though he's got a very high-level ground game, he's a very good MMA grappler, he never uses it. Swanson always prefers to stand and strike. It is very rare you'll see him shoot a takedown. Now, perhaps Swanson will evolve, will pull a Glover-type evolution on us, and in this later stage in his career, evolve into a grappler and use more grappling heavy game plans. But until we see him do that, we can't expect him to do it. So when trying to predict the outcome of a fight such as this, all we can do is look at the past performances of Dawodu and Swanson to give us the best indication of what to expect from them this weekend. We know Dawodu's takedown offense isn't great. It's not terrible. It's not great either. But Dawodu's real issue is that his ground game is very, very bad. He's very weak off his back. He's very green on the ground. He makes a lot of mistakes. And with him being 32 years old, having almost 20 pro fights now, his takedown offense and ground game has been an issue throughout his entire career, ever since he was in the World Series of Fighting with Ray Sefo here in the background. So from my perspective, you would expect Dawodu to be making improvements from fight to fight, but if he hasn't made any massive improvement in his takedown offense and ground game by this point in his career, for me, it's unlikely he's going to. So Swanson has the big advantage on the ground. Now, when it comes to striking, when you look at how both guys perform, there's not a massive difference in how these two match up. Hakeem Dawodu is definitely the more powerful, athletic, physically imposing striker. I feel he can land the harder, more impactful shots. For the most part, Swanson's more of a volume striker. But I would give the footwork, the movement, the defence, the technique to Swanson. Another area where Swanson has the edge here is volume. Swanson stays quite busy and he throws a lot of volume. Dawodu, on the other hand, can be passive at times, not really pull the trigger, and not do a particularly good job of putting his stamp on rounds just because he doesn't throw very much. If you look at Dawodu's record, one telltale sign that you've got a low volume fighter on your hands is when you see a guy that has fought to a lot of split decisions. Because when you see a guy that has fought to split decisions, it usually is a sign that they struggle to put their stamp on rounds. And why might that be the case? Well, because they might not have done enough in the round to convince the judges they won the round, right? So you can see split decision here, split decision here, split decision here. That kind of highlights that Dawodu is just very passive at times, doesn't have the best fight IQ, can let rounds slip away from him. So the way that I look at this fight from a betting point of view is, due to Swanson's age, there's no way I can bet him this weekend. It's just too strong of a trend for me to fight. But there's no way I would bet Dawodu as a big favourite either, because I think Swanson is skilled enough to make this competitive in a stand-up fight if we get the best version of Swanson. So I'm not going to be betting this fight this weekend, but if you really, really, really want to bet this fight, I do think it is dog or pass. I think all the value lies with Swanson. Dawodu, as this big of a favourite, is a very, very bad risk to reward ratio. I don't see any value there at all. So if you really want to bet it, go with the underdog. But just know it's rare that a 39-year-old is going to beat a 32-year-old. So if we take a look at the over-under on this one, we can see that the over-under is in the even money odds range. And again, I would agree with this. I don't have a strong feeling on it. I don't have a strong lean either way. I do think it's more likely the fight will go to a decision, because if you look at Swanson, even though a lot of his fights have ended inside the distance in recent years, you know, we know for the most part he's a volume striker. We know Dawodu is very, very durable. He can take a shot. He's got a good chin. So I don't think it's that likely that Swanson would finish Dawodu. Now, Dawodu does land hard, impactful shots. He does have knockout power. But if you look at Dawodu's record, he's a bit of a decisionator. He frequently goes to a decision. And this is not because he's not dangerous, because he is. But he just doesn't really throw very much. He's quite a low volume passive guy. He's more of a sniper that likes to pick his shots. So because of that, a lot of his fights tend to go the distance. An old saying in football, if you don't shoot, you don't score, right? Dawodu doesn't really commit hard enough to throw in big power shots to take his opponent out. Now that doesn't mean he can't knock out, you know, a 39-year-old Swanson that is probably on a steep decline, won't be as durable as he used to be. But my lean with, you know, how technical both these guys are is that this fight would go to a decision. I'm not going to bet on it personally, because I worry about the durability of guys like Swanson at this stage in their careers. But if you do want to bet the over-under on this one, I would go with the fight to go to a decision. In terms of the props on this, so it looks like the odds are favouring slightly Dawodu to win by knockout or TKO. Again, I don't see... I mean, these odds are very steep. I don't see a really nice prop that I like. I won't be betting props myself, but if you want to sprinkle a little bit of money on a prop to make watching more interesting, I would go Dawodu by decision. But I don't feel great about it. I think the odds are bad. I think you're getting a very bad risk to reward ratio. And I think my hair is doing my fucking head in because of how fucking hot it is in here. It's gone fucking crazy, boys. It's gone fucking crazy. It's warm. We don't get much sunlight in the UK. It rains most of the year, so when we get a little bit of sunlight, we get a little bit crazy, and our hair gets all fucked up. That's just the way it is. Can't do nothing about it. I need this is why they have the fucking hair and makeup teams in Hollywood, right? Because in this fucking heat, which you get in LA, fucking hell, man, do a little bit of work, your hair turns into a fucking bird's nest. So anyway, boys, and the fucking 0.3% female audience who watch this is probably like my mum and my wifey. Maybe my sister from time to time as well, who knows. But hello, 0.3% of females that watch this channel. Anyway, let's get into the next one, which is going to be Khalil Rountree versus Chris Daukaus. So, if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Khalil Rountree is the favourite at average odds of around 1.53, which is going to be minus 189 for an implied probability of 65%. If we take a look at the odds on Chris Daukaus, he is around an average of 2.55, which is going to be plus 155 for an implied probability at 39%. So Khalil Rountree is 33 years old, 6'1" with a 74-inch reach, and Chris Daukaus, 33 years old, 6'3" with a 76-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same size, the exact same age, and obviously this is going to be Mr. Daukaus's first venture into the light heavyweight division to possibly stave off getting his walking papers from the UFC, because you know often if you lose 3 fights in a row you get released from the promotion. So it looks like Mr. Daukaus is trying to mix things up, do something different to rejuvenate his UFC career by dropping a division, and I like it a lot because Daukaus, even when he got in better shape in the last few years, still always looked really soft in the heavyweight division. He always looked like he could have been a light heavyweight because it's 6'3" with a 76-inch reach. There's a lot of guys in the light heavyweight division with a wingspan similar to that, and with how soft he was, you could see there was weight to lose. So it's going to be, you know, really interesting to see how Daukaus does this weekend. You know, in the light heavyweight division, a brand new weight class, and that's obviously a bit of an unknown coming into this fight this weekend. So we don't really know what to expect from Chris Daukaus as a light heavyweight. He could look completely different. You know, one recent example that sticks out to me is Wellington Turman. You know, if you go watch Wellington Turman in the middleweight division, he looked flat-footed, slow, sluggish, sloppy, bad defensively. But then when Turman cut down from the middleweight division to fight Randy Brown at welterweight, he looked sharp, good defensively, quick. Wellington Turman looked like a completely different fighter. So I'm optimistic for how Daukaus could improve this weekend in a new weight class, being a lot lighter, not carrying all that excess body fat. And as a result, that does add a huge layer of uncertainty to betting this fight, because we don't really know what we're getting here. Fortunately, we know what we're getting with Khalil Rountree. There's a lot of footage available on him. Tends to perform the same in every fight. Doesn't really change things up. He's got a very, very heavily Muay Thai based style of fighting. So we know what his strengths and weaknesses are, but ultimately all we can do here is look at Daukaus's past fights at heavyweight against, you know, very big guys in a different weight class to try and visualize how he may match up with Khalil Rountree. And if Daukaus shows up and performs like he usually does, this is a pretty bad stylistic matchup for him, because we know that Khalil Rountree's biggest weakness is his takedown defense and ground game. If you put Rountree on the ground, not only is he very, very bad, but he also tends to get tired very, very quickly and slow down very quickly. But that probably won't be an issue this weekend, because it's been a really long time since we saw Daukaus use a grappling heavy game plan. The last time we saw Daukaus grapple was all the way back in 2019, 4 years ago, against Azuna Anyanwu, and he basically grappled pretty hard in this fight in round 1, gassed himself out grappling, got finished in round 2, and that's probably the reason why my nose is itchy. It's probably not the reason why my nose is itchy. Mr. Anyanwu and Daukaus have nothing to do with my nose being itchy, but the reason why we haven't seen Daukaus grapple in the last 4 years is probably because the last time he did grapple, it cost him big time, and he lost to Anyanwu. Now, it might be different this time. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. He knows one more loss will probably mean he'll be released from the promotion. So he's dropping a weight class to try and rejuvenate his UFC career. What else might he be changing? Is he going to come in with a different game plan and strategy? Is he going to try and fight smarter? Who knows? But if Daukaus has done his homework on Khalil Rountree, he's probably going to know it's going to be a difficult night's work if it stays standing. So the smartest game plan for Daukaus to use would be a grappling heavy game plan. And if he does come into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan, because of how bad Rountree is on the ground, Daukaus has probably got a pretty good chance of winning. Yes, Daukaus may gas himself out grappling, but that might not even matter, because whenever we've seen guys use grappling heavy game plans against Rountree, Rountree's also gassed really bad from all the grappling. So, you know, it might not even matter if you've got two guys that are tired, but Daukaus can still take Rountree down even when they're both tired. Then could be a really good path to victory for Daukaus. And obviously we know Daukaus' brother, you know, Kyle Daukaus, does frequently use grappling in fights. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Daukaus come in with a grappling heavy game plan this weekend. And if he does, obviously he could cause Rountree big problems. But ultimately, all we can do is try to make the best decision possible with the information we've got available. And based on past fights, it's obviously unlikely Daukaus will grapple this weekend because he hasn't grappled for 4 years. And if the fight stays standing, this is going to be a very difficult stylistic matchup for him. Yes, we know Daukaus hits very, very hard. He's got true legit knockout power in his hands. But Rountree is far more technical. Better footwork, better movement. You know, throws a much higher volume of strikes, a much more diverse range of attacks. He's got devastating leg kicks, body kicks, head kicks, great boxing combinations. And he throws significantly more strikes than Daukaus, even when he's tired. You know, Rountree's one of these guys that even when he gets tired and sloppy, he still throws. So if the fight stays standing, I would imagine Rountree would light Daukaus up, outstrike him by a wide margin. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Daukaus use a grappling heavy game plan this weekend. And if he does, Rountree could be in a lot of trouble. So because of the uncertainty around how Daukaus is going to look at light heavyweight and whether or not he will grapple, this isn't a fight I'm going to be betting. I think this is a very dangerous fight for betting. There's no way I would bet Khalil Rountree as a big favourite, because you know if Daukaus tries to grapple, he's probably screwed. But there's no way I would bet Daukaus either, because you know if he fights like he usually does, he's probably going to get lit up for 3 rounds, maybe even brutally knocked out. So there's no strong position on a fight like this. No matter who you bet on, you're putting your money in a lot of danger. If you disagree, let me know in the Discord. Let me know in the comments below. But for me, this one's an easy pass. If we take a look at the over-under on this one, obviously, it's pretty likely this fight is going to end inside the distance. The odds reflect that, though, with it being steep favourite odds on fight not to go to a decision. Obviously, both guys are aggressive. They've got true legit knockout power. Both very dangerous. This is not one of those fights I would be betting on to go to a decision, but the odds are too steep to bet on it to end inside the distance also. So the over-under is a bit dead for betting. In terms of the props, let's just refresh so we get the latest odds. Here we are. You know what I would go with? I don't know what the odds are, but fight to end in round 3. We don't have the odds for it, but fight to end in round 3 might be a good prop, because both guys do slow down a lot as fights wear on. So by the 3rd round, both guys might be too tired to defend themselves, and one guy gets finished. Maybe Daukaus stops Rountree on the ground. Maybe Rountree knocks Daukaus out on the feet. So we don't have the odds for it, because for some reason they're not loaded on best fight odds. But I would take a look at the odds on fight ends in round 3, because I'd imagine they'd be pretty good. If the odds on Daukaus to win in round 3 are like 15.0 and Rountree 19.0, I'm guessing the odds on the fight to end in round 3 will be like 10.0, 11.0, which is like plus 1,000. So yeah, I quite like that. I would go with that. Like I say, probably won't be betting it myself, but I hope you found that useful. At the beginning of this video, I did say that there was a very good bet on this fight, and I promise you I haven't clickbaited you with the title, with the thumbnail. I do think there's an incredible bet on this card, and it's on the fight between Polyana Viana and Yasmin Lucindo. So obviously, when it comes to betting on MMA, anything can happen. We win some, we lose some. But I do believe that there's an incredible bet on this fight. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Yasmin Lucindo is the favourite at average odds of around 1.53, which is going to be minus 189 for an implied probability of 65%. If we take a look at the odds on Polyana Viana, she's around an average of 2.60, which is going to be plus 160 for an implied probability of 38%. So if we go and check out my pre-fight betting results, if we go to the database, once the profitability chart loads, there it is. If we go down to the database and we type in Polyana, you can see that we bet against Polyana in her last fight when she fought Tabitha Ricci. I actually need to edit this because I haven't put the money line odds in, which is very triggering. There we go. So if we look at Polyana's last fight, not her last fight, sorry, her fight before that, we bet on Tabitha Ricci to beat her. And we're going to do it again, boys, by betting on Yasmin Lucindo. I think this is a very, very difficult stylistic matchup for Polyana Viana. And this is one of those fights where, unless something crazy happens, I struggle to see how Polyana is going to win this. It's a very, very good stylistic matchup for Lucindo. The exact kind of bet that I love to place. Obviously, you guys know that we've done great on pre-fight betting this year. If we bring our profitability chart back up, you can see that we've only had 2 losing months in the last year. And those losing months in February and July were relatively small losing months. And if you look at our performance, we're just doing really well on pre-fight bets. You know, we're racking up wins. We're doing well. And yeah, man, grinding out profits and performing really, really well on pre-fight bets. I mean, look at this. Across these 10 bets here, we went 8-2. With plenty of underdog winners in there. And of course, you know, a lot of our bets are in the even money odds range as well. So, you know, we're getting good odds, hitting underdogs, even money bets, all that kind of good stuff. And you know, the reason why we've been able to perform so well on pre-fight betting in the last year, you see this little uptrend here, doing really, really well, is because these days, I've completely changed my approach to pre-fight betting to the point where now I only take bets where I can overwhelmingly stack the odds in my favour, and I know the only way I'm going to lose is if something improbable happens. And Yasmin Lucindo absolutely fits the criteria of that kind of bet, because this is one of those matchups where I believe that Lucindo is significantly better than Polyana Viana in every single aspect of MMA. So let me go through the reasons why I think Lucindo is a good bet. Now, obviously, I got to preface this by saying, look, it's MMA, anything can happen. Of course, we lose bets from time to time. It is what it is. But over the long term, we know if we keep getting our money into positions like this, we're going to make a profit. There's absolutely no question. So let's start off with a tail of the tape. Lucindo is 21 years old, 5'3", with a 66-inch reach. Viana is 31 years old, 5'5", with a 67-inch reach. So we can see that both girls are roughly the same size. Viana is longer and taller. Lucindo does have that smaller, more muscular, more compact frame. But I don't think size is going to play too much of a factor in this fight. Obviously, Viana was a lot bigger than Tabitha Ricci, and Ricci handled Viana just fine, absolutely dominated that fight. Now, there is a 10-year age gap in this matchup, but I don't think this is one of those situations where the age statistics apply, because at 31 years old, Viana isn't going to be declining, and at 21 years old, Lucindo is going to be making big improvements from fight to fight. And to be fair, she is. If you look at Lucindo in her fights before she came to the UFC, and then you look at her last 2 performances against Brogan Walker and Yaragui, she looks like a completely different fighter. And Lucindo is one of these fighters that is improving at an exponential rate, which is one of the reasons why I like her. Because at the rate at which she's improving, we know every time we see her, she's going to be significantly better than she has looked in the past. Whereas Viana, we haven't really seen a whole lot of improvement in her. You know, she's still not all that different from the fighter she was 5 years ago. Yes, she has the odd quick win here and there off a Hail Mary armbar, or knocking down, you know, an older fighter like Nchukwi. But for the most part, all the weaknesses that Polyana Viana had back in 2018 still plagued her in her loss to Tabitha Ricci. So she's not really improving or evolving that much. Yasmin Lucindo is. So let's consider how these two match up from a stylistic point of view. So in terms of how they match up when it comes to striking, this is an area where I think Lucindo has got a pretty big advantage. Because if you look at her fight against Yasmin Yaragui, who in my opinion is one of the best strikers in the division, Lucindo showed great cardio, a lot of toughness. She took a lot of damage in that fight and hung in there. She's got a good chin. She fights at a high pace. She's aggressive and she's got decent pop in her shots. What I really like about Lucindo in this fight is that her style of fighting for the most part is boxing based. She throws a lot of punches. And that's different to Polyana Viana, who has a kicks-based style of striking. I know that she was able to drop Nchukwi with punches in her last fight, but if you go and watch the majority of Polyana Viana's fights, she likes to chip away at you with long-range finding kicks, and her boxing isn't that good. So whenever you've got a fighter with a kicks-based style of striking versus a boxing-based style of striking, the boxer's always going to have the advantage because it's a lot easier to punch someone in the face than it is to kick him in the head. And while Lucindo can kind of chip away at Viana with jabs, good combinations, it's going to be harder for Viana to land big, hard, impactful strikes with her kicking game that are going to get the attention of the judges. Lucindo looked very, very good standing in front of Yaragui. And this is one of those fights where if it stays standing, I think Lucindo's boxing is going to be too much for Viana. I think Lucindo's boxing is going to be the difference. Something else that I really like about Lucindo in this fight is that her last two fights against Yaragui and Walker were both contested at a reasonably high pace, and her cardio looked great in both matchups. She fought at a really high pace in both, particularly the Yaragui fight where both girls pretty much sprinted from the beginning. This is huge because one of the things that has got Polyana Viana into trouble over the years, particularly in her fights that stayed standing, is that she does slow down a lot as fights wear on. She throws big, heavy, impactful kicks, but because they're big, heavy and impactful, they take a lot of energy. So Viana does slow as fights wear on. Lucindo's cardio is a lot better. So already we've got Lucindo with the advantage striking and the advantage when it comes to cardio. But the real area where I think Lucindo can cause Viana a lot of problems in this fight is on the ground. And we know Viana has had a lot of trouble on the ground in the past with capable MMA grapplers. Polyana Viana is one of these fighters that is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. But unfortunately, she's one of these fighters that wants to be on the ground. She's one of these fighters that is quite happy to lie on her back, attacking with long shot submissions. And every once in a while, she catches one of them. Every once in a while, she traps someone in an armbar. And she is very active off her back. She's got a very active guard. She's quite nasty off her back. However, whenever we see Polyana Viana face a capable MMA grappler that understands position, they understand how to neutralize the threat of the armbar by just going to half guard or side control, where your opponent can no longer throw up their legs off an active guard and look for, a triangle or an armbar. Whenever Polyana faces someone like that, she looks completely lost. And this is the reason why we bet on Tabitha Ricci, because Ricci was a capable MMA grappler that could just take Viana down, control her from top position and rack up points. And we know that if you put Viana on her back, she will just lie on her back, attacking with long shot submissions, not really making any effort to get back up to her feet. Now Lucindo is young, she is inexperienced. It's possible that Viana could catch Lucindo with something crazy on the ground, catch her with an armbar, something like that. But if that doesn't happen, I feel Lucindo wins this fight a very high percentage of the time. because if Lucindo keeps the fight standing, she's got an edge there. If the fight goes to the ground, she could probably stay in top position, chip away at Viana, control Viana from top position, win a decision there. And the cherry on top of the cake is Lucindo has got much better cardio. So the longer the fight goes, the less likely it is that she's going to get caught in a submission. She can just weather the early storm. Viana likely won't have the energy to catch her in a submission in the second half of the fight. So there's so many reasons to like Lucindo in this matchup. And we know we have a very big edge when it comes to betting women's MMA. Matern that analyses our performance and our results to try and find areas that we can improve. Looked at our performance betting women's MMA, and we know our win rate on pre-fight women's MMA is around 70%. We perform extremely well when we bet on women's MMA, and I'm hoping Lucindo can just add to that statistic. If she doesn't and Polyana finds a way to win, it is what it is. MMA is a crazy sport. You're always going to take losses. But we know that our edge is absolutely massive when we bet fights such as this and put our money into positions such as this. So I know that Lucindo is a relatively big favourite, but I'm happy betting her as a relatively big favourite because the way I look at a fight like this is she has so many ways to win, and Viana's path to victory is very narrow. If Viana doesn't submit Lucindo off her back, I feel she loses in any other realistic scenario that could play out. Very unlikely Viana is going to knock Lucindo out with how tough and durable she looked against Yaragui. Yaragui is far more dangerous on the feet than Viana is, far more skilled as well. And her cardio's better, so it's unlikely she's going to gas out and run into trouble against Viana. She's a capable MMA grappler as well. You know, it's one of those situations where she's a very good stylistic matchup for Yasmin Lucindo. And at 21 years old, she's very, 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 very good. And I think she is going to be, I think she is going to develop into one of the best strawweights in the world. I rate her very highly. I think she's a great fighter. I'm very impressed with it. And she's got a very bright future. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in Discord. Let me know what you think, guys. Let me know what you think. So if we start off by taking a look at the over-under as we go into the props. Both girls are very tough. Even though Viana, has seen a lot of her fights. I do feel this was a little bit of regression where just some improbable Hail Mary submissions hit both for her and against her. Before that, against reasonably tough opponents, she was going to a decision. She went to a decision against Richie. Yasmin Lucindo, more of a volume striker. You can see her last 3 fights have gone to a decision. I think it's quite likely this fight goes to a decision. I'm tempted to bet on this fight to go to a decision. I'm not sure if I'm going to. But I do think it's a lot more likely this fight goes to a decision. I'd be surprised if it ended inside the distance because I don't think it's that likely Lucindo will finish Viana. If the fight ends inside the distance, I think it's because Viana's hit some kind of Hail Mary submission. And I don't think it's that likely she's going to be able to do that. So for that reason, I would go with fight goes to a decision. Now, in terms of the prop bets on this one, the only one I would consider is Lucindo by decision, but the odds are absolutely terrible, so I wouldn't bother with that. I would give it a miss. You're not getting a particularly good deal on your money with odds such as that. So I hope you found that breakdown useful. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be AJ Dobson against Tafon Nchukwi. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, we can see that Nchukwi is the favourite at average odds of about 1.67, which is going to be minus 149 for an implied probability of 60%. If we take a look at the odds on Dobson, he's around an average of 2.20, which is going to be it is going to be plus 120 for an implied probability of 45%. So Dobson is 31 years old, 6'1" with a 76-inch reach. Tafon Nchukwi is 28 years old, 6 foot tall with a 77-inch reach. So we can see that both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size, no notable X factors on this one. So let's dive into how these two match up from a stylistic point of view. They've also got a similar number of fights, so similar experience level. So this is one of those matchups where I do think Dobson is a reasonably good amount better than Tafon and Nchukwi everywhere. I've been really impressed with Dobson. His takedown offense is pretty good. When his head's been in the game, more on that in a little bit. When his head's in the game, his grappling looks pretty good. His cardio is reasonably good. Aside from obviously getting worn down by Jacob Malkoun. But typically his cardio is pretty good. And also, he's a very technical striker. Dobson is one of these guys that I think has the potential to be one of the best fighters in the division. Because when you look at him, he is very, very, very good. But when I look at Dobson, he also strikes me as one of these guys that is very much in his own head. Every once in a while, we get a very skilled fighter come along. But you can tell mentally they may be lacking a little bit in terms of performance anxiety, preventing them from being able to perform to their full potential. Or maybe just bad fight IQ and decision making in fights, causing them problems. GSP said the fighting was 90% mental. And you really see that with a guy like AJ Dobson, because he just doesn't make particularly good decisions in fights, and he struggles against guys that he's a lot better than, and he tends to hold back a lot. So this is one of those matchups where if both guys show up and perform to their full potential this weekend, I think Dobson causes Nchukwi big problems, because I don't think Nchukwi's going to be able to get the fight to the ground. I mean, he probably won't want to, right? Nchukwi is predominantly a striker. So if the fight stays standing, I think Dobson's the more technical. I think he throws a higher volume of strikes. I think he's better defensively than Nchukwi. And I also question if Nchukwi is a little bit chinny as well. He suffered a strange knockout at the hands of Mirzakhanov and was dropped off a jab against Carlos Ulberg. So if the fight stays standing, for me, Dobson is the better striker. And since Nchukwi is unlikely to try and take Dobson down, this is likely to be a stand-up fight. And as a result, Dobson's a better striker. You give Dobson the edge. So this is one of those matchups where I really feel it's going to depend on what version of Dobson shows up as to how this is likely to go. Because to refer back to the Rafael dos Anjos Vicente Luque fight, the one thing that I do like about Tafon and Nchukwi is that you know exactly what you're going to get from him. He performs the same in every fight. We know he's going to come forward and look to take control of the centre of the octagon and chip away at you with his technical kickboxing. He lands big, hard, powerful, impactful shots. He's got decent cardio. He's pretty tough. My problem with Nchukwi is he doesn't throw a particularly high volume of strikes. He is a little bit low volume. And that's probably because he is such a big, muscular, physically imposing guy that he does probably have to fight at a slower pace in order to pace himself. Dobson, better striker, should get this done, but I feel this might be a little bit lacking. So we'll see if he gets it all together this weekend and performs closer to his full potential, showing us what he's really capable of. So if we look at the over-under on this one, where are we? Here we go. The over-under is a tricky one for me. Personally, with how tough both guys are, and also kind of how passive they are at times, I do think there's a decent chance this fight's going to go to a decision. But they both do hit pretty hard. They are both dangerous strikers, which I know is a bit of a contradiction to what I've just said. With Nchukwi getting knocked out pretty easily in his last two fights, I wouldn't feel great about betting on any fight involving Tafon and Nchukwi to go to a decision, because I do feel he might be a bit chinny. So my lean on the over-under here is that it goes to a decision, but I won't be betting it. I would stay away. If you really want to bet the over-under on this, go with the over, but I wouldn't feel great about it. In terms of the prop bets, again, I won't be betting this, but if you're the kind of person that wants to sprinkle a little bit of money on every fight to make watching the fights more interesting, I think the best prop is probably Dobson by decision at 6.0 plus 500, but not a particularly strong position. And yeah, man, I'd personally pass on this fight. So I hope you found that useful. Let's get into the next one. Josh Fremd versus Jamie Pickett. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that... Where are the odds for this one? It's probably right in front of me. You're all probably saying, it's by there, it's by there. Here it is. So Josh Fremd is the favourite. Average odds are around 1.29, which is going to be minus 345 for an implied probability of 78%. If we take a look at the odds on Pickett, he's around an average of 3.60, which is going to be plus 260 for an implied probability of 28%. So Fremd is 29 years old, 6'4", with a 76.5-inch reach, and Jamie Pickett, 34 years old, 6'2", with an 80-inch reach. So we can see no major X factors on this one. Pickett's a bit older, but at 34, he's not particularly old for a middleweight. Pickett's a little bit shorter than Fremd, but that kind of cancels out, or is cancelled out by the fact that his reach is a bit longer. You know, it's an interesting fight, this one. This is one of those matchups where I definitely agree that Josh Fremd should be the favourite. I do think he's more likely to win this. But this is also one of those matchups where I feel the odds should probably be closer than they are. I don't really feel Fremd has as big of an advantage in this fight as his odds suggest. Because if we look at his odds, they carry an implied probability of almost 80%. To only give Jamie Pickett a 20% chance of winning this fight is kind of crazy. Now, I'm not the kind of guy to go and place bets on underdogs unless I think they've got a clear and obvious path to victory, which I don't feel Pickett has here. But this is just one of those matchups where I look at the odds and I just have a feeling Pickett is skilled enough to make it competitive based on how he's looked in his past fights. So if we talk about how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, and we start with striking, to be fair, there's not a huge difference between the two. Like, I wouldn't give either guy a massive advantage when it comes to striking. Josh Fremd is probably more dangerous offensively, but I would say he's worse defensively. Fights with his hands low, doesn't read his opponents particularly well, does get dinged a lot on the feet. Pickett moves better and is more technical when it comes to striking. He's also better defensively than Fremd, but he's not quite as dangerous offensively. But he could have decent success on the feet in this fight because of how bad Fremd is defensively. Now, when it comes to grappling, this is an area where Fremd definitely will have an advantage over Pickett. You know, we've seen Pickett look quite low level on the ground, make a lot of mistakes, give up position a lot, give up cheap takedowns. But we've also seen Fremd slow down a little bit in a fight where there's been a lot of grappling against, it was in his debut against Anthony Hernandez. And while I know Hernandez is a much better grappler than Jamie Pickett, Pickett is still a big, strong, physically imposing dude with a good gas tank that could make Fremd work hard on the ground. So this is one of those matchups where if Fremd can turn this into a grappling match, he probably does pretty well. But if the majority of this fight stays standing, I wouldn't be surprised if it were very close. So I'm not going to be betting this fight. My lean is definitely Josh Fremd, but obviously he's too big of a favourite to bet. And I don't see enough from Pickett to make me want to roll the dice on a big underdog here. So this one is an easy pass. If we look at the over-under, my lean is actually on this fight to go to a decision. So I am very, very tempted to bet the over on this fight, simply because neither guy is particularly dangerous. You know, you can see that Fremd does have a lot of finishes on his record, but these tend to be against a really low level of opponent. And how often do we see it where, you know, a guy like Fremd will have a lot of decisions, and then as soon as they face a step up in competition in the UFC, they start to go to a decision more frequently. That's probably what happened in the Anthony Hernandez fight. You look at Pickett, again, a lot of his fights recently have ended inside the distance, but before that, he was a bit of a decisionator. You can see decision here, decision here, decision here, decision here, decision here, where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his 7 fights within this small window went to a decision. And he also went to decision against, you know, dangerous guys, right? Like Punahele Soriano and Tafon and Nchukwi, who are very heavy-handed, very dangerous. So I do think a little bit of recency bias maybe weighing into the odds here. And I actually think there's a reasonably good chance that the fight goes to a decision, because neither guy is particularly dangerous, to be fair. Neither Pickett nor Fremd has a lot of knockout power in their hands. They're not particularly dangerous on the ground either. I think there's a reasonably good chance this fight goes to a decision. I'll probably bet it, to be fair, at underdog odds. These odds seem very generous to me. Now, if we take a look at the prop bets on this one, Fremd by decision is the prop I would go with. Again, I'm not going to be betting it myself, but if you want to sprinkle a little bit of money on the fight to make watching more interesting, I think Fremd by decision is the best prop. So I hope you found that useful. So, thank you everybody for watching. Hope you find the breakdowns useful enough to make some money this weekend. Don't forget, hit the like button below. If we get 200 likes, we'll do the O'Malley versus Aljamain Sterling breakdown video. Live stream. Head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com, where you'll find breakdown videos for all the prelim fights on this card. So if you like these main card breakdowns, you can find breakdowns for all the prelim fights over on my website. Check it out. Link in the description below. Have a great week. I hope you absolutely smash it. Love every single one of you for watching this. Really appreciate you. Subscribe, all that kind of shit. And I'll see you with another breakdown soon. And hopefully a live stream for Sterling O'Malley. Nice one, guys. Take care. Bye.